So the Black Daddies Club.
Yeah.
So what was the inspiration behind that? What is that exactly? Yeah, let's get into it.
I mean, yeah. So Black Daddies Club came by like. So I think to answer that question is that there's a personal side, right? As I mentioned, there's like being born in Jamaica. I'm the only child from my mom, and like one of 7 from my dad. Yeah, growing up, me and my pops, there was like this. We kind of connected later on in life,
okay.
If you get me, right? Yeah. But I think he also was dealing with stuff around masculinity. And what I mean by that in terms of, Black masculinity in Jamaica is sort of seen as like how many kids you have, right. This disciplinarian, very patriarchal, right? And I think one of those pieces, having multiple children, whether you can take care of them or not, is sort of an afterthought.
Right.
But I think it's that process, and I think it's sort of seen as a way of showing how manly you are, right? That you can you can procreate,
right,
or breed,
right. Let's say, to call it, yeah.
And I think my dad was like as forward thinking and as intelligent he was. I think he was also dealing with these other pieces which a lot of Black men, myself included, deal with. And later on in life, I had my first son. Him and I, we started to like have this really altering relationship, right? And what I mean by that is that it was sort of, really, I recognized, I had to like park or work through whatever anger I had towards my pops.
Right.
And then also like forgive and also forgive myself, whatever that means. But going through that process and trying to build this new relationship. And then upon building that relationship, I had my first son, and my wife was pregnant with my second son, and my father got murdered in Jamaica by an 11-year-old kid. And then 2 weeks later, that same kid was murdered by the same people who hired him to kill my father.
Oh, so people hired the 11-year-old to kill your father.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was paid the equivalent of like 200 Canadian at the time. But I think for me it was like when I went to the police station and I was talking to the detective, and he was sort of like, this is normal, right? And it's one of his comments to me, and I was just like, this 11-year-old kid kills my pops, then gets murdered, and this is normal. And then for me that was sort of like this moment of like, Oprah calls it or aha moment.
Yeah.
But this realization that there's a normalization in crisis within Black communities, but there's also acceptability of sufferation within Black communities, and that could be in Jamaica, that could be in Toronto, that could be in Brixton, and then the question was like, what am I doing? In terms of making this world any better.
Right.
Black Daddies Club, it started out of like issues or questions that I had around what does it mean to be a Black father, right? Growing up, watching the Huxtables and the Cosby Show, and for me that was like, one of the few positive imagery of Black masculinity or Black parenting,
right?
But at the same time, though, recognizing that wasn't my reality, right? And other friends who had, who are now fathers, they had questions because the father could be in the picture or could not be in the picture, but they're balancing this piece around masculinity and what it means to be a man, and now balancing this thing called fatherhood, right? So in 2007. Black Daddies Club was started.
Wow. So 10 years later.
This is the 10th year.
So I guess let's explain exactly what it is specifically that you do in regard to the Black Daddies Club.
So when Black Daddies Club started, we did like a series of discussions around the community, because the first thing was trying to figure out if it was even needed.
Right.
And we did 4 different discussions, great turnout, but we were seeing more women than men showing up. And for us, we're like, okay, that's great. We're getting community voices, but we're not getting the men's voices who we want. And someone suggested we go to a barbershop. And there was this other program called More Than a Haircut that was happening that was doing a similar thing on Eglinton West. It's still doing it. So we started to like look at different barbershops across the city. And then we looked at one called Onyx downtown. I'd known one of the owners from high school, also in Scarborough.
Scarborough.
So anyways, so yeah, we went in and we had this discussion, and from there we were doing these discussions on Sundays because they had like a half price cut for fathers on that day, so we knew we were getting,
Right, mostly Father's Day.
And then we would start to, at the start of the discussion, we would engage the barbers first. And in that way, when someone's sitting there and they're seeing their barber buy into this dialogue, they were more apt to sort of join in, right? And we would basically use those discussions to be like asking these men, what are some issues or what are some things that you want to talk about, right? And then from there, so we're using that as like data collection and building programs around that. So issues were coming up around like, I want to spend time with my kids, or I may only see my kids on the weekend. Funds may be an issue. And this thing around creating space, or I want to know other fathers. I don't want to be like my father, you know what I'm saying? So the first couple programs came through partnerships. So one was with Kids Up Front Toronto, which is an organization that gives free tickets to organizations. So we did this thing called Daddies and Me, where we got tickets to go see to go to the AGO or the Raptors game or Leafs tickets, and we'd go as like this huge community.
That's amazing.
And it's like it was this powerful thing going into like white spaces like the Art Gallery of Ontario, and it's a sea of black men with their youths, and it's like holding hands, or kids are running up like they had no brought up seat, and it's just like, it's just a dope thing, right?
So how has it grown over the 10 years in terms of like, okay, you're here, we're at the 10-year mark. Are you happy where it is, or where do you want it to go?
I think, so I think the process of the 10 years has been challenging, right? Because Black Daddies Club has never been funded, right? Like it's either... we've been funded for research projects. So we did a research project that was funded through the City of Toronto. It was called Gathering Our Voices. We worked with U of T in New York. So, and then we did another one in Jane and Finch. Those research projects have been funded.
Right.
But in terms of staffing, it's like, in actuality, it's a lot of it has been me working a day job, taking funds from that, and applying into this thing that you believe in, right? Because I think I do this work, it's survival work. You know what I'm saying? Having 3 black boys in a school system that doesn't represent them, it's like this work is life work, but it's survival work. So it's like, and I think also the challenge, like I've worked in the nonprofit sector in Toronto, and the challenge that I see, it's like, it's difficult to like, especially working with black fathers and black men, we're not a sexy demographic, you know what I'm saying, in terms of to apply for a fund. So it's like, you have to do this work, and partnerships are key, being creative in terms of how we do this work. The only reason we've lasted for 10 years is the fact of partnerships from community members and meeting those people who sort of sees the vision or doing work, and we're like, oh, how can we do this thing? You know what I'm saying?
You brought up a lot of points, and probably thoughts that other black men who are fathers are thinking, and that's why I think, this club and this organization is very important, because people, especially in like, say for instance, like a co-parenting situation, right? They see the single mom because most of the work is still put on her, even in a co-parenting situation. And so we don't necessarily look to the father who may have his son on the weekends. And a lot of the times it's just, okay, you're going to your dad's on the weekends, but as his mothers or societies society, we just look at it as okay, you're going to your dad's for the weekend to go have some fun, you guys can go play video games, eat some junk food, and then you come back on, you know, Sunday before school, and then mom is back to you know, back to work and back to discipline. But I personally think it's important to carry that through, right? Even if it's on the weekends, to still have those conversations and those lines of discipline, and important to see those fathers who may just have their child on the weekend and give them that support that they are able to parent just as much as the single mom is. I think there's so many points in that piece. So for me, you know, I was raised by a single mom, and I had to pick. So like there was, you know, I don't want to make it sound, you know, that, you know, having a single mom is all challenging. Right.
My mom did the best she could, you know. I take a lot of what my mom her parenting into my parenting with my kids. So I feel like I'm a lot. So I've taken on that feminine side, and I'm a lot more nurturing with my kids. The other opportunity I felt that I had the opportunity to pick and choose my masculinity. Right. So I was able to like see different men, whether uncles, men in the community, that I'm like, yo, this little part, I like that. I don't like the other part. So like, I have this uncle in Brampton, Uncle Harry, shout out, who, you know, he had 3 youths, you know, 3 boys. All of them went to do post-secondary, coach them doing soccer. They all went to do soccer scholarships. But like, you know, in the mornings when I'd go to March breaks and I see this guy making like porridge, you know, or making dinner, and I was like, yo, that's dope. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, and I was like, I used to reason with him, and I think for me, it was like, you know, choosing men that had like, I don't know, I think that was helpful for me. Right, being able to choose those qualities. Exactly. Of men that exactly, and not necessarily, maybe if my pop was around, and you know, if he was there, like I would just feel like I have to emulate this one rigid, the good, the bad, and then because this is what masculinity is and it's not. You know what I'm saying? Exactly, right? One of the things around Black masculinity that bell hooks talk about is how around masculinity there's this idea of lying, right? And she gives the explanation that a lot of Black men, you know, are raised by single moms, so they learn to lie because they don't want to disappoint or face that punishment. Right. So that carries on to their romantic relationship later on in life. And I thought that was there was some truth in that. But I also think around masculinity on a whole, and looking at like, so I was seeing that there's 2 types of masculinity, right? You have the immature masculinity and you have this mature masculinity. And this mature masculinity is this idea of being honest as a key piece, and being seen. So the other thing that was sort of I took from that trip was people talking about the importance of being seen in relationships. And a lot of the times we're dating and we're performing constantly. We're on dates. Like auditioning. It's auditioning. And it's never really, and someone gave the analogy of like, you know, your parents said, you know, go clean your room, you take all the garbage, you sweep it underneath the bed. Right. So everything on the out looks good. Presentable, yeah. And a lot of the relationships are just like that. We never show our partners what's underneath the bed. Selves, and then with that being said, then how can your partner really truly be in love with someone? You know what I'm saying? And I think that was sort of the piece that was that was super key for me, right? And just being like really, not just in romantic relationships, but just in general, being transparent, being vulnerable, and trying and doing that with my kids. Having 3 Black boys, and also in very much ways like, you know, there's no blueprint for this parenting thing, right? So in many ways, you know, I'm practicing with my kids. I don't say practicing is the word, but it's like it's trial and error. You know what I'm saying? And we're learning together as a unit. But it's I think that for me that showing vulnerability is key, and having a conversation with my kids, because I'm trying to get these guys prepped for like manhood,
right,
and try to think of whatever rites of passage, because I didn't go through it. So how do you, like, that's all the thing, like, how do you, you're learning at the same time as you're trying to parent, you know. So yeah, before start Black Daddies Club, you know, I typed in black fathers in Google, seeing like deadbeat dads. You know, you look at CP24, you see shows how did that depiction of black fathers, and so there's a power in the media in terms of like if you're repeating the same thing over and over, not only is white folks are going to believe you, but believe it. Some black folks are going to start to believe it as well, especially young black folks who are seeing this and it's like, well, shit, you know, I don't see any kind of programs for black fathers. I don't see any kind of supports when I go to the courts as a black father who is dealing with custody or whatever. I'm getting dealt with a certain way. I'm hearing black men who have dreads. Their lawyers are like, yo, you need to cut your dreads off.
Really?
You know, so it's you know, so it's like, I'm not trying to say it's like, as black men, you know, like we're under. I do think black men is on the siege, but I also think black women and also black trans folks are also on the siege. Sometimes that oppression looks very different, and sometimes it looks very similar, right? But I think what I have a problem with is this narrative, like, yo, this platform can only speak about my challenges or my beef, and I think in terms of Black Daddies Club, it was like to start showing a different imagery of some black folks' reality. You know what I'm saying? And let's start highlighting these black men who are showing up. You know what I'm saying? And creating space for these black men who are showing up, but for them to also talk about the challenges that come with that piece. You know what I'm saying?
I definitely appreciate you coming and sharing your story with us and starting this very, very real conversation, and hope people see this and continue the conversation, and also, you know, reach out to you and see how they can be a part of what you're doing, because as I said, I definitely think what you're doing is very, very important, and I hope it does get the platform that it deserves.
Thank you very much, Toni.
No,
appreciate that.
No problem at all.